Welcome to this Fireside chat. Today I'm joined by Reid Stanway, who is the digital placement leader for Marsh. Thank you very much for joining us, Reid. I thought we'd start off by asking you a bit about Marsh Intuitive and its digital strategy. Could you talk us a bit through the concept and the successes you've had with it so far?
Sure. So Marsh Intuitive, and thanks for having me here today. Marsh Intuitive is a rebranded version of what SQL has called Rulebook. It is a quote and bind based platform that uses intermediary architecture that SQL's worked with ourselves to deploy. But in essence, it allows us to support carriers by having and allowing them to trade in an algorithmic context with us. By onboarding their rating models into a cloud environment that SQL Manager worked with us on. And what's important about that is it allows us to have it where markets are working with ourselves, where they're not handing over their pen, but we're also delivering best-in-class customized product to our customers around the globe or our insurers/clients. And it forms a pretty interesting piece of our overall digital trading strategy. As Marsh is moving forward, we're having lots of different means and methods to trade with the marketplace. Here in the London market especially, we're seeing what we'll call marketplace platforms. We also have third-party gateways or integration gateways. And then we have things like the Rulebook Hub and Intuitive, which are a part of our tool and arsenal, and increasingly so, becoming more and more.
I suppose a lot of the problems that we've seen historically from trading platforms is the fact that everyone has different gateways, different connection points. How have you tackled the challenge of the data standardization and how to benefit from that?
It is a really important piece of the puzzle. Data standardization, at least in Marsh, and as I speak with the various other markets here in the UK, I think everybody's trying to figure out their digital trading strategies and then how their data standards fit into it. So what we have ended up is, some markets might call it a digital spine, some might call it a carrier integration gateway, but it's a lot of what we call these canonical APIs or pipeways into any individual market participant, and then having translation at those points of entry. But what's important there is, I think each individual, whether it's a broker or an insurer, are coming up with their own data standards and then mapping and translating to market standards. And it's really advantageous when we see marketplaces like PPL or Whitespace, where they're working with folks over at Lloyd's coming up with market standards like the core data record of the IMRC, or we have SQL 6 with some of their data standards. What's helpful there is, as an individual market participant like Marsh, we can map once and gain many. So it does accelerate digital trading quite quickly, where we map and then it translates, as opposed to doing many connections and doing many mapping. There's always going to be a space for us to do lots of different mappings, but by having our own data standard and then mapping with various different market data standards, it can improve the scalability of digital trading.
Fabulous. And you've had a lot of markets join Marsh Intuitive already. Are there any particular players, types of carrier, classes of business which benefit more than others? And I suppose my second question to that is, are there certain product types that work? And if so, why? Why do those products work better for this distribution model?
Sure. So I'd actually say one of the great things about Intuitive is that it doesn't limit any one carrier from being able to work with ourselves. I think that the nature of the way the architecture is set up is that it can allow a market who does effectively no digital trading capabilities or haven't, say, these flashy acronyms, which aren't so flashy anymore, APIs. If they don't have them, they can still work with ourselves. And it could be as simple as providing their underwriting methodology or underwriting guide in the context of a spreadsheet and being onboarded into that cloud environment. So I don't think there's a limiting factor for markets.
So are there types of products, the more commodity-based, the complexity, the size and scale and the question set, what seems to fit and really accelerate the onboarding process versus a harder product to get distributed?
Yeah, sure. So we find a sweet spot in terms of products. We'll start off with sort of client segments, if you will. So, we do see products, especially in an intuitive context, where we're dealing more with sort of algorithmic based underwriting, where underwriters aren't touching it as much. It seems to focus more in the lower corporate/commercial segment. And I know we all call these a bit different, but think about smaller, medium-sized companies, and then their associated product lines with those. Now, that being said, products, as they're being traded currently in the market, will be entirely dependent on those market dynamics. So, for example, cyber 2 years ago, when we were putting that into Intuitive, was an absolute home run. But as we've seen, cyber has become a very difficult market and quite hardened. So what you see there is where previously we could have gotten quotes as well as bound with 5, 10 pieces of information. Suddenly we're into 30, 40, or we need to actually have what we'll call configured negotiated trading, where markets are interacting with it. So I think the products themselves, we do see a lot in the sort of war and terror space. They lend well to algorithmic trading. Construction, surprisingly, is actually pretty well traded. We do know that marine cargo and some of those work well as well. And then there's a whole host of other products that we're looking at. But I would say there isn't really a one catch-all answer. It really comes down to the complexity of the risks that are being underwritten. So you can have really large premiums inside of a terrorism risk being bound, but maybe that's because the information being entered is somewhat simplistic at the front end. And I shouldn't belittle it, it's not always simplistic. But it comes down to the individual risk that's being underwritten, and it can scale in terms of client size that's associated.
And I think a lot of the benefits we sought to seek with you as part of this program of work was to really help the end retail broker get access to products much faster, not having to go through many different APIs with different question sets in order to get slightly different answers, which then have to compare. And explain a bit about the work you've done to make sure that that retail broker's experience has changed completely from where you were before.
It's and when we were speaking, Paul, maybe a couple of years ago when we were looking at this, it was very much that was the vision, and that's continued to be the vision, is us really harnessing distribution and changing a bit of how we interact with our retail network. It is a very much consultative approach. A lot of what we're doing here is not necessarily down to the tech, it's to do with change management and a change in the way in which we interact. And we do have successful instances of colleagues in our Canadian operation or our Australian operation entering information and going through the proper channels in terms of our tech, and then being able to get quotes through our wholesale, where we've onboarded a carrier through one of our line slips here in the UK. And that's fantastic. I think it's a lot of change for our colleagues. So what that requires then is consistent engagement with our wholesale brokers, with our retail colleagues, constantly interacting, and then similarly on the tech side. So what we have is something along the lines of a monthly steer co, engaging with those folks on the ground and getting that input, refining, tweaking, and adjusting the products, whether it be tech-based or whether sometimes it might be appetite. There's sometimes really subtle things that you can change that dramatically improve the adoption of a product.
Marvelous. And so I suppose really turning to the future a bit, what's next? What success you'd like to replicate? Where do you think the platform's going? And have you got any messages for any markets or distribution partners that might want to join the platform?
Yeah, there's a lot in that one. So what's next? I think it's continuing to build on the success and the learnings we've already had. With anything that's a new digitally traded platform, it is that agile approach. Test, deliver, improve, and then build on the successes and learn from some of those perhaps not successes. So I think it's maybe a doubling down on our side on looking at what we've got there and then continuing to replicate those instances where we've had success. I think there is a bit of a lean towards where we can create a bit of product standardization, if you will. That's very difficult in a marketplace for specialty products, but it may be that a portion of a product could be standardized. So how can we reuse lift and shift as opposed to building from scratch so that we can get the start to finish launch time of any given product that much shorter so we can begin to scale faster? I think those are some of the key focusings for ourselves as it relates to Intuitive. Now, that being said, you've spoken about whether or not other markets should join in. I think it's a tool in any one carrier's arsenal for distribution. The final market right now, I'm looking at it, and there's 15, 20 different choices on how to deliver my capacity in the market. I can build out my APIs. I could go into a marketplace platform. I could get into one of the aggregator third-party gateways. there's tons of different mediums in which they can deliver their capacity. But what I view the Robocop as is it actually it's kind of a catch two. You get to begin to trade with Marsh on some of these well-distributed products, and that's always what's in the game is you get that, and then you can also look at some of that's reusable. I treat it as another marketplace. A carrier who onboards their rating model into the hub. It's not as though another competitor of ours couldn't necessarily enjoy a version or reuse some components of that. So I see it as reusability.
Right. Well, Reid, thanks very much for spending some of your busy time with us today. I hope you found this useful. Please stay posted. We'll put some more content up and follow the link below for content coming out soon. But Marsh and Reid, thank you very much for supporting this Fireside Chat.
Nice. Thank you so much.